Hello everyone and welcome back to the OverSeers. My name's Proilios and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Nightwing. We are finally at the rear end of the Kickoff Clash Qualifiers, and I'm not gonna lie, a lot of my Preds have been screwed over in the process of following this entire set of qualifiers, especially by the APAC region just because of how um, really competitive the games were. And I think Nightwing is probably just some kind of magical clairvoyant because he's been insanely accurate at predicting winners. So, first of all, Nightwing, what's your secret? And secondly, how do you feel about how the kickoff clash qualifiers went in general?
You see, I'm uh, basically relying on the hoot.gg statistics, which is this really fun little like almost side quest for Overwatch League viewers that's been made this year, where uh, there's like stocks for each team and you can trade them. So I'm following the market trends and looking at the insider information uh, you know, for those stocks to figure out who's going to win the matches. But in all honesty, I think it's a little bit of a fluke because, especially in the APAC region, uh, things have been really wild because a lot of teams can show up on random days. There are so many map fives, especially with the LA Valiant against other teams, who finally got their first win this week, by the way. And uh, I think it's just going to be a really interesting tournament this time, especially in the APAC region. Uh, and I mean, that's what the initial matches that have happened so far are telling me because uh, while there is, I think, some sort of hierarchy still established in the NA region, uh, you have a lot of strong teams there that will be contending for the title. In the APAC region, all four teams that have made it are like insanely talented. And we'll talk about what I think about who's going to win later, but it's possible that it's anyone's game, honestly.
Yeah, I think the APAC region especially was super interesting just because of how up and down almost all of the teams were. We almost could never make out if one team was better than the other because it was mostly not skill winning over it wasn't skill beating just less amount of skill. It was a clash of play styles more so because even though a single region generally has a similar play style, each team ultimately kind of resorts to their comfort picks, and that's what ultimately determines who wins and who loses. But before we can get into the kickoff clash a little bit more in detail, we want to quickly go over a bit of news that dropped just after we recorded last week's episode, actually, which was that the Boston Uprising officially parted ways with Striker. And a lot of fans were disappointed by this piece of news because naturally they were like, the Boston Uprising are a professional organization. How could something like this happen? And I think a lot of us kind of saw this coming when Halo tweeted out the rumor that Striker was going to be let go. And naturally, it's not a piece of news that's well received by Overwatch League fans because Striker is probably one of the most respected players, respected veterans in the owl scene. But I'm not going to sugarcoat this because I do think it will cost the team a few wins. But I feel happy for the Uprising in general because they've rid themselves of a big problem within their organizational structure. I feel like even a single player that kind of ruins the team's morale by just like acting demotivated, ruining the team's atmosphere, putting up a negative vibe. I think that kind of problem just needs to be dealt with immediately. And if Striker was that guy and he was that negative influence on the team, just demotivating them all the time, I think it was the right move by Huck and anybody within the management team of the Uprising. So I think it's going to be really difficult for Striker to find another team because this is the second time that he's left a team seemingly because of just some personal issues. So I wish him the best of luck in whatever happens, but I hope his behavior improves and that he's more accommodating towards any team that signs him in the future, if any.
Yeah, I think there is some amount of evidence to show that Striker doesn't really get along very well with his team. And I think that's really been perpetuated through, his performance on Shock last year and his whatever dealings he had over there. And then now it seemed like that was just a repeat of that happening on the Boston Uprising as well. I think this is honestly, a good thing for the team because they could not really figure out who to field. And now they're stuck with, more like limited choices. And you can see that that is almost helping the team a little bit, even if they did get demolished 3-0 by the Dallas Fuel. You could see that the team actually had a game plan in mind and were subbing in the right players for the right roles uh, in terms of the tank players, really, since they've got basically a limited set of players for the other roles. So I think this works for Boston. I think teams that are sticking to more limited rosters are having an easier time, especially early in the season. Uh, because you don't have that comp structure established yet, especially in this year where there are so many rookies that are still struggling to work in an Overwatch League sort of system. Since there is some level of disparity between how an Overwatch League and a contenders team sort of function. So I think maybe Striker gets picked up by the some of the APAC region teams or maybe the NYXL. Uh, but honestly, I think if he really is causing that many problems in the team, he's probably not really worth it because there are like a lot of really talented players coming into the league, and you can see the Striker's gameplay wasn't really that great this season from what he did play on the stage, and last year it seemed to be dwindling as well. So I don't think there's any reason to continue the professional organization meme in terms of in the striker situation, even if Boston is very very silly at times in other places. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. All right, and we don't want to talk too much about this because we do have some really big games coming up for the Kickoff Clash tournament. And for those of you that don't know, the Kickoff Clash tournaments are going to be regional, so there's going to be one winner each from the APAC and NA regions. Now, 8 teams have qualified from NA and 4 teams from the APAC region. They're going to fight it out among themselves in double elimination brackets, and all of the matches except for the finals are going to be first to 3 map wins, and the finals are going to be the first to 4. So it's going to be a lot of interesting games, and naturally the Kickoff Clash bracket predictions are out on the official league website, so you guys can lock in your predictions over there. And yep, I think we should just go straight to talking about some of the teams that we think have the highest potential of getting the championship in their respective regions. And let's start off with the NA region, which has 4 teams that we think are like capable of winning the championship, and it's just going to be a little bit of back and forth. But yeah, let's just talk about the first team that we have planned over here, which is the Los Angeles Gladiators. And what are your general thoughts on the Gladiators, Nightwing? Because even though they came into this tournament qualifiers with high hopes and a lot of expectations behind them, they had a few slip ups here and there and did have to fight tooth and nail for the spot. So, what are your general thoughts on them?
So I think it, if you would ask me this in the previous week, I would say the Gladiators are way too shaky to be a decent contender, if I'm being honest, because their early performances indicated that they were not quite comfortable with their new players, especially Patifan. They weren't really able to, figure out how to play that uh, winsome play style. And I think that might still be an issue because uh, you can't really say they're at that same level of executing that composition as they are with, uh, as maybe other teams are with it. For example, the Dallas Fuel or the SF Shock. That said, I think if you saw the latest match of the Glads against the Atlanta Rain, they showed many different styles. They pulled out the Sigma and played that to perfection. They pulled out the Rhine comps even, which I thought was really impressive. picking it up from the London Spitfire. Uh, and they played that pretty well as well, even if they were, trolling a little bit from what it seemed like. I think the Gladiators have finally figured out like how to like play these different compositions, how to field their different players, and I think that'll probably be a big boon for them because there are some maps that still favor particular playstyles. I don't think the Winston meta is applicable everywhere, and that's why you're seeing, the Zarya being so popular in the APAC region. So I think in that sense, the Gladiators actually decently well placed to try and contend for this spot, even if I don't think they're necessarily my favorite pick.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Gladiators have had some really good peaks during these qualifiers, but consistency is where they've kind of let the team down. I think Shu has been quite remarkable, Kevstar as well. They have been pulling their weight, and I think Rhino has kind of settled in with the team, although he's not that kind of carry level player. He has been very stable and he hasn't made a ton of mistakes. So the team has a reliable tank uh, who has a starting spot naturally. So they are comfortable with him, I guess. Uh, I think Parafan definitely needs some work. You could see Face fielding Parafan on the Soldier 76 and making Kevster play the Genji for a bit just to see how things work. And Kevster does seem to be better on whichever of the two heroes that he plays. And they do have like Ants to play on those sniper heavy maps where he can just dominate on the Widowmaker. So they've got a pretty good team rotation set up. Uh, I do think it's still going to be an uphill battle when they contend against some of these top tier teams, especially like the Dallas Fuel and the San Francisco Shock, whom we'll talk about in a bit. But there are a few other teams that can definitely hold a candle to them. So I wouldn't say the Gladiators definitely have like a straight line towards the finals, but I do think they can go deep into these playoffs and maybe make it to like the third round of the losers bracket or so. I mean, this will be clearer if you actually have the brackets in front of you. But yeah, I think let's move on and talk about the Florida Mayhem. And honestly, when we did the power rankings at the beginning of the season, or rather before the season, I don't think either Nightwing or I would have guessed that the Florida Mayhem would actually qualify for the very first tournament, because it seemed like a very um, weirdly matched up team because almost none of these players had any kind of pre-existing synergy. It was kind of a mix and match of multiple regions, and with a lot of players with a lot of different backgrounds. So it's super funky kind of to see them qualify over here, but they've certainly made some good plays that have brought them to the spot. I think Nightwing, I would like to ask you, like, what do you think are the kind of strongest parts of the Florida Mayhem? Like, whom do you think are the players that are going to kind of carry them throughout these playoffs, if there are any carry players in your mind at all?
Yeah, I think two standout players for me are probably someone uh, who who I'll talk about first, uh, is a rookie tank that's come in and has played basically everything that he needs to in a perfectly serviceable and even better way than some of the established tanks in the league. I think he's incredibly strong and like just works quite well within the team. He has, like a positive attitude, which I think is lovely to see. I think he's generally probably part of the glue that holds the team together at the current point, because he's engaging really well with these dives. He's able to get out at the correct times. I think that goes to show that the communication in the Florida Mayhem is genuinely quite impressive, and they are like fundamentally quite solid. Because the Florida may have even shown that they are like able to iterate on their mistakes. Because I think in the first week they looked strong, but not incredibly strong. But as time has gone on, you've seen that the Florida Mayhem has actually, just minded their P's and Q's and kind of solidified their entire playstyle, which I think is quite impressive. Uh, the other player I think I want to highlight actually is probably Sir Majed. Uh, I think Checkmate has also been good, but there are a few question marks around him still. regarding his Sombra play, etc. So I think someone that is a good shout out is Sir Majed, because he's playing quite an impressive Ana, and he's going for these mechanical carry plays, especially with the sleep darts and the anti-nades. Even he's able to outduel multiple players that try to flank around him, and he's also able to keep someone's fairly aggressive style at times. Uh, backed up quite well with the heels. So I think Surmajed is actually working quite well within the team. He's Saudi Arabia's gift to esports, as people are calling him, and I think he's actually much better than I expected. Because I was fairly low on him in the sort of preseason preview, and I think I'll have to retract my words on that, because I think he's been quite good for the team.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, and I think the DPS duo of Checkmate and Hydron has also been fairly consistent, and they've also been quite adaptable. I think even though Checkmate does have a lot of like a few iffy moments here and there when he plays the Sombra, I think his Genji as well as Tracer have been fairly good. I think Hydron also provides a really consistent um, kind of consistent flow of damage on the Soldier 76. His aim in general is just really good, whether you talk about the flicks or the tracking aim. So I think both these players can definitely help this team out in most situations. They've also got XZ as kind of a pocket pick for those sniper based maps, although they haven't been fielding him in every game necessarily. Um, I think the team has got they've got a good bit of chemistry set up naturally with someone at the helm, like Nightwing said. Like, I think the team is in general on the same page, and I do think that the Mayhem in general have looked a bit more consistent than the LA Gladiators, which makes me think that they are a slightly better team, like slightly like more in contention for the Kickoff Clash like tournament than the Gladiators. Although I don't think the Florida Mayhem are like top contenders, I do think they can make it kind of to the semi-finals or so. They might even make the finals if they just play out of their minds. But yeah, I just wouldn't count them out at all, even though we have two fantastic teams coming up that we still have to talk about. So let's move on and talk about the San Francisco Shock, whom Nightwing and I thought at the beginning, at the beginning of last week, were probably the strongest team overall throughout both regions, and I don't think it's like our opinions have changed a lot. It's just that a lot of teams seem to be at the top tier right now, and I think just to talk about the Shock right now, uh, it's back to kind of the old San Francisco Shock days, where they've got just a bunch of talented players who work really well together. They've got amazing communication set up. They're all disciplined and all mechanically skilled. I think it's just a really scary team to go up against in general. I think all the Shock rookies have also had a great debut all tournament so far. You naturally have got Proper with Rookie of the Year potential, just absolutely slapping on the Tracer. Even got some amazing moments on the Genji. You've got Kilo, who's actually been more consistent than I expected. Although he's not playing crazy well, I think he does have some really good moments on the Soldier 76 and even the Widowmaker. They also played a little bit of double sniper with Widow Ash on Circuit Royale, which was amazing to see because Proper also got to pop off on the Widowmaker. Then naturally they've also got Sam, who surprised a lot of us with his Genji play. We also know he is really good at Echo, so like the DPS line is just fantastic. Like Finn is just amazing backup as well, and then they've got Koluj, who is uh, probably one of the weaker players on the roster, but I don't think he's disappointing at all. I think he's genuinely trying his best and honestly working well with the team. I think he fits the structure. He is willing to learn and he seems to be coachable. So I think that's working out for the team really well. So all in all, I think the Shock are in a great position to make it to the finals of the Kickoff Clash and maybe even lift the trophy. And I'd like to know your thoughts on this as well, Nightwing.
Yeah, I think the thing you mentioned about Koluj being, still sort of a work in progress is true, because you can see comparing him 1-to-1 directly with Smurf, who is also in a similar position as Kaluj in terms of being the solo tank for his team. You can see that Smurf on the Winston comp that's currently meta obviously has much better primal rages. The timing is much better, and he's able to juggle players around and isolate them a lot better than Kaluj is. But that's also due to Smurf being used exclusively as a Winston one trick. I think in terms of just fundamental play, in terms of how you position yourself as a tank, how do you just work with your team? How do you create space? I think these are things that are quite clear to Kaluj, and he's working well within the team to achieve these. I think you can see from the short clips that like the SF Shock put out here and there, the team does have like good communication, and they're clearly showing it in game. I mean, they're obviously 6-0 so far in the qualifiers. They only really dropped maps like against that Gladiators game where they had to reverse sweep. The Vancouver Titans game where they were sort of trolling, to be honest, and it was like extremely clear to see. And the Paris game, which I think was actually sort of a genuine loss, but that's you can forgive that. I think apart from that, the SF Shock has basically dominated every other map they've played, and that's why they're 18-5 on maps, which is quite insane. I mean, the second best team for that is 15-5, which is the Dallas Fuel. Kilo, I think, might not be an excellent matchup against some of these other soldiers, actually, because I think he's not getting as much value as some of these other soldier players are. But I think some of that is also because some of these other soldier players are going for that, nano visor, feast of famine sort of playstyle, which is explosive and does get you, those fancy 5Ks and team kills. But it's not very consistent, and it doesn't guarantee your safety if the enemy has a counterplay. So I think I may be able to, overlook Kilo's apparent weakness on that. I think Proper is still definitely a contender for Rookie of the Year. He's only looked stronger as the weeks have gone on. Sam is a great, just substitute for the DPS line, and the Violet Lucio has also not looked bad. I mean, he's also flexed over to the Brig at times, holding the high ground on Dorado with Ana and Brig. I think that's looked quite good as well. I think the entire team is working really well together. The fact that it's a small roster means that they're able to work on their communication really well in each scrim, and I think that's really showing, its results currently.
Yeah, very good points there. I think let's talk about the final team in the NE region, which we think can really make a leap for the championship, and that is the Dallas Fuel. And I think all of us knew from the beginning that the Dallas Fuel have got not just tournament winning potential, but like league winning potential this season. They showed us a lot of that last year as well, and I think with a lot of impressive additions to the roster, uh, this team has really got a good momentum going. We got to see We've gotten to see all of their DPS play a fair bit now. We saw some amazing moments from Guri on the Widowmaker just this weekend. Uh, Edison has just been a starter for this roster for a long time now. Just playing a very consistent Soldier 76, and even the Tracer if the team needs, to play that Tracer comp. I think Doha and Sparkle have also been brought in at the right spots. When Edison needs to play the Reaper, Doha can fill in on the Soldier 76, and since his tracking game is good, it's just a match made in heaven. And then naturally, Sparkle is that kind of pop-off player whom they bring in when they want those carry plays on the Genji or on the Pharah, right? So it's a great rotation that Rush has set up once again. Naturally, they have two of the best tanks in the business with Fearless and Hanbin, and since each map kind of doesn't require a lot of swapping between the main tank and off tank role, they can generally solidify one tank to confidently play a single map. So naturally, Fearless can come in for the Winston and the Reinhardt, whom he's fantastic at, and then Hanbin can play the Zarya, and naturally, his Zarya is one of the best in the league, in my opinion. So as long as he plays Zarya and coordinates well with Sparkle and Edison or whoever's playing, those Genjis and those Reapers, it just works out for the Dallas Fuel well. I do think Hanbin needs a lot of work on his Doomfist, which has not been that good. But either way, I I do also think that Chio is just a really amazing main support. He has been one of the best peelers I think that we have seen in the league so far this year. Just helping out Fielder all the time. Like Fielder just rarely dies when Gio is around, and naturally when you don't challenge Fielder a lot, Fielder gets a lot done. So even though he's not been making a ton of plays, Fielder just keeps his team alive, and like the Dallas Fuel just win by living through most fights. So that's just something really impressive about them. And honestly, I think that the Fuel are in the best position to win the Kickoff Clash, because even though I think the Shock have a lot of talent as well, I think the Fuel have been like slightly less forgiving to other teams. Like they've had more dominating showings, and they've shown just as much skill as the San Francisco Shock. So I think with like a better position on like the main tank role, sorry, on the tank role in general, I would say, as well as on the main support role, because I think Chio is definitely better than Violet. I think the Dallas Fuel are best poised to take the kickoff clash for the NA region. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
I think those are incredibly solid points, and yes, the Dallas Fuel uh, are probably my like part of my two potential winners for the Kickoff Flash. I think it's between either the Shock or the Dallas Fuel, and I think you'll probably see the both of them in the finals unless one of them really drops the ball. And I think the rotation that they've got with Doha and Sparkle does raise some concerns for me, because they've played more Doha recently. I'm not sure if that's just them giving Doha playtime or whether that's something they've had to do, finding a weakness within Sparkle, or maybe he's just not working that well within the team. But I'm guessing it's just balancing out the playtime between their four signed DPS players. I think I'm still a little bit on the fence about Edison. I think there are times where he does pop off, especially on that Reaper, which I think he's playing quite well, especially within that Zarya comp, which I think he works excellently as sort of a faux main tank when he's playing alongside Hanbin's Zarya. But I think that when he's on the soldier, he's sometimes not that impressive. I also think like Fielder is just not going for that many plays, I feel, uh, which I think is sort of classic Fielder. You could see that even in previous seasons, he always went for sort of a more safe play style instead of going super aggro and going for frags. But I think in Overwatch 2, that's something that's sort of mandated out of flex support at this point. And Chio as well. I feel like the DPS have sort of been dominating the conversation in terms of who gets the elims on the Dallas Fuel. And that's something that not a lot of other teams are seeing, where you're seeing other teams have their supports do sort of pop off, especially if you look at the Soul Dynasty with Vindame or even Fixa on the Fully Fusion. So that's maybe a point of concern that could sort of hit the Dallas Fuel hard, but these are individually talented players and they're working to peel for each other to avoid picks. So I think it may just be a difference in playstyle and positioning that may be causing this. Um, that said, yeah, I think the Dallas Fuel are incredibly solid and could potentially win the Kickoff Clash. I think it is between them and the Shock.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. I think that's enough said about the NA region. Let's quickly go over our top two contenders for the APAC region, and let's start off with the Hangzhou Spark. And the Spark have been quite a pleasant surprise thus far this season. They've had some really honorable victories against some really competitive teams, and also some not so honorable ones just off the back of Alpha E, who has just out of nowhere shown up and proven that he could possibly be Rookie of the Year this year. I think there are a lot of rookies that could be Rookie of the Year this year, but Alpha E is certainly one of the most impressive ones in contention. Like, I think the Hangzhou Spark overall are just a really solid team. They've got a lot of talent on each and every role. Like Gushue and Burna have been covering the tank role really well. Alpha E naturally just popping off on the Genji as well as the Echo, just single-handedly carrying so many fights just in the past weekend. Like I've lost count, man. The guy's cracked, and naturally he's playing alongside Shy, who is also really consistent hits can play. Although Shy has not been as good as he was last year. I think he's still competent and has proven his worth. They've also got a really solid backline in Super Rich and Irony. You can see Super Rich making kind of like semi-Reddit plays now and then, going for risky, like a little risky flanks, confirming kills by going a little too aggressive, and naturally Irony just being a really stable flex support. So I think this team has probably been the most consistent team in APAC, even more so than the Shanghai Dragons, which is the other team that we have in mind to talk about. So I think they have a really good shot at making the finals and winning the kickoff clash, but naturally it's going to be a big fight between them and the Dragons. But yeah, let's get your thoughts on the Spark first, Nightwing.
Yeah, so like you said, I think Alpha E has been sort of the star of the show for the Hangzhou Spark, and a lot of the team's resources have actually gone to him, uh, basically in whatever role he might choose to play. And I think that's been working out really well for the uh, Hangzhou Spark so far, uh, where you'll see Alpha E, turn around a lot of these fights. Uh, Sometimes even when they're players down, and that is quite impressive. He is definitely a Rookie of the Year contender at the moment, and I think that will continue to be the case as the season goes on. I think the Hangzhou Spark may be slightly lacking on the Winston comp if I'm being super critical. I feel like Gushue is not all there with the coordination with the rest of the team. I think some of it might be due to him not getting all the resources, just because all of them are pumped into Alpha E. But I feel like that might be something that uh, teams can exploit to actually take out Gushue first and then sort of build momentum off of that. Because the Hangzhou Spark have actually won the most games uh, in the APAC region and have the best map differential. But they've still dropped 9 maps, and compared to the Dallas Fuel and the SF Shock, that is like a larger number. Uh, I think personally for the APAC region, uh, I don't think it's a clear-cut victory for either the Hangzhou Spark or the Shanghai Dragons, even if we are talking about those two teams today because they're the most likely. I think all four of the teams have a very good shot depending on which team figures out what to do better in this upcoming week. I think the Hangzhou Spark do have the advantage of having a really, really solid, flex DPS in Alpha E and a very good, backup hit scan DPS and in Shy as well. But other teams have insane DPS lines as well, uh, to the point where if one of them decides to show up on a day, then you could see that team just finding success. So I think the Hunger Spark are incredibly solid. They've got 2 tanks to round out the rotation, which I think is an advantage over teams like the Soul Dynasty. Uh, but I feel like they're not perfect on that Winston comp, which seems to be the most meta comp currently. I don't think they have a lot of great flexibility onto the Doom comp personally. I don't think they can pull that off, even if that's not a super viable comp, as we can see. I just feel like the Hangzhou Spark maybe do not have as many styles to show off as, a team like in the NA region, such as the LA Gladiators, which I think could be a point of weakness on maps like Circuit Royale, where you want that, sniper duel. Uh, but overall, I think they are like in a good position to try and secure the win for the kickoff clash.
hmm And how do you feel about the overall matchup against the Shanghai Dragons, who naturally, after winning the championship last year, are fighting for glory once again in this tournament?
So I think for the Shanghai Dragons, remember how I talked about some teams, unlike the Shock, going for these feast and famine plays. I think that's what they've been doing with Lip sometimes, where they're putting a lot of resources into him and then just going for a super aggro, tactical visor, nano boost play, which I think works at times because the soldier just has that aimbot and he can run around with a lot of mobility. Uh, but I feel like Lip has actually not been that great this year. I feel like his soldier has been mediocre. I feel. Um, I think probably the best player has actually been Fleta, who they bring in on the Reaper for these final matches. Uh, I guess he's filling in the shoes of Super as the finisher, because he comes in these map 5 series, or even just the last map in general, especially on push, to play the Reaper with the sort of Zarya playstyle with Void, and he just pops off. I think, Fleta is definitely still making a name for himself, and he's clearly showing why he was the Season 3 MVP. And I think he's probably the most solid part of this roster. I think the backline is still solid. I feel like Lijegon is probably a little too aggro compared to some of these other supports, and that's what hurt the Shanghai Dragons, especially in their earlier matches where they got 3-0 by the Philly Fusion, for example. Uh, so I think the Shanghai Dragons have just a few maybe discipline issues to work on, and they need to have a more solid and sort of well-rounded play style, I feel, because right now they're trying to individually skill diff, but that doesn't work when you've got such star rookies on other teams, along with established players like Prophet and Fitz on the Soul Dynasty as well. So I think the Shanghai Dragons, they should lead into their extremely potent coaching stuff and actually try and like create a more solid play style that works for them, because that's what you're seeing from the SF Shock and the Dallas Fuel and the NA region, where they're not always going for super flashy plays outside of that one player that they put resources into. They're all generally quite solid, and they try and stay alive, which I think players like Lee Jae should probably have a look at. He's always been known to be an aggro player, but losing a player in uh, Overwatch 2 is a lot more significant than in Overwatch 1. Uh, so I just feel like the Shanghai Dragons are still a little bit shaky on that aspect. That said, they are 5-1. They've only lost one match, and they are looking incredibly strong in these past few matches. I do think it's, like I said earlier, anyone's game in terms of who can actually win the trophy.
Yeah, I also do want to mention how good Hua Yu has been on the Genji. Like, even though he's had a couple of off maps here and there, all in all, his Genji has been one of the best ones that we've seen. I think I mentioned this not even last year, like maybe a couple of years ago, that Hua Yu's Genji is kind of like the like when he plays Genji, it feels like you're watching the actual Genji from the Overwatch law fight. It feels his gameplay feels so fluid, so smooth, so genuinely ninja like that he just feels like a really natural kind of assassin, and like I don't know, it's kind of like ASMR Genji gameplay, kind of like how I call Kevster the ASMR Tracer player, but yeah, whatever. I think Huayu has been a really nice addition to the kind of starting lineups that the Shanghai Dragons have been using. I don't think a lot of people were expecting Huayu to get as much playtime as he has so far, but I guess because of Genji being meta, he's got that opportunity to shine. Um, I think the team did struggle towards the beginning because they were having some communication issues. We did mention before the season began that the Dragons relied a lot of on Fate's leadership and his shot calling to execute their plans. And when he was out of the lineup, you could see that they were really struggling with Void because they didn't have that kind of solid voice in their heads just telling them the game plan for each fight. So they were a little bit all over the place, which is why they lost their very first match quite brutally to the Philadelphia Fusion. But since then, they've seemed to figure out a lot of their structure. I think the first match was just kind of a litmus test on Moon's part to see how the communication works out for them with Fate out of the lineup. And I think right now they've struck a good balance between fielding Fate and Void and sorted out the communication issues because they kept feeling more and more like the Shanghai Dragons as they kept playing more and more maps. So I think we've got the Shanghai Dragons of old and the Shanghai Dragons of season 4 back, and I do think they can, like, they're probably uh, one of the strongest teams in the league once again, and are definitely one of the top contenders to win the Kickoff Clash in the APAC region. So yeah, those are our thoughts on all of the teams that we think can win the Kickoff Clashes in their respective regions. Any additional thoughts, Nightwing, or should we run things up?
Yeah, I think there are some teams that have fallen down in this past week, such as the Atlanta Reign and even such as the Seoul Dynasty and the Philly Fusion. in the APAC region. But I think these teams, if they step up, they have a good shot at trying to win, uh, this tournament. It's just that some of these teams are not quite flexible enough, or they've just not shown enough pop-off potential and like explosiveness or consistency, uh, which is why we sort of put them lower. Uh, but I think that there are many teams that can actually take the title if uh, like these teams actually falter in some or the other way, because teams have a tendency of doing that. They'll be at a crazy high point and then they'll just sort of drop spaghetti, which is basically the story of every Overwatch League match ever. So I think you should be on the lookout for some of these other lower seeded teams as well. Uh, it's just that we think that these teams are the ones that are going to be the most successful. I'm really interested to see things like the sniper duels come out on Circuit Royale. I'm also really interested to see the Winston comp mirror now that teams have, I think, figured out a more stable meta between juggling between the Winston comp as well as the Zarya comp on maps like Push. So I think it'll be an interesting compositional matchup between teams that are more comfortable on the Zarya style versus the Winston style, uh, as well as seeing who actually executes those mirrors in a more technical fashion. So that's, I think, going to be my main highlights for this Kickoff Clash in this next week.
Yeah, I think there are going to be a lot of amazing games coming our way next week. It does seem we like it's going to be a long weekend or just like a long end of the week, I guess. Even though that kind of means the weekend, I guess. But we've got what? How many? We've got one, two, three, four, 5 games in the APAC region, and we've got like a lot more in the NA region. So it's going to be a massive tournament cycle, and yeah, be prepared to watch these games at the right time because once again the regional time differences are going to make it hell for us once again to just keep up with both of them. But yeah, I think it's still going to be a really fun experience in general. So if you guys liked our analyses and want to share your thoughts, feel free to use the comments below and do leave a like. We would really appreciate it. The video would just enter the YouTube algorithm more frequently and help our content reach more Overwatch League fans like yourself. And yeah, we just really appreciate the view. And yep, and anything more to say, Nightwing?
Yeah, uh, I don't know if everyone knows this because I found out semi recently. Apparently, the team that wins the Kickoff Clash gets a recolor of that Reaper Luchador skin, which I think is really interesting. So if you're holding out hope on your team winning the Kickoff Clash, then maybe save up on those tokens and get that recolor in your own team's colors, because that's always fun to have. Yeah, but that's all I have to say.
Yep, that'll be quite interesting to see. Honestly, I hope the remix skins don't cost a hell lot because naturally we are all kind of always short of our tokens just because of how many skins we buy, just out of our love for the league. But yeah, uh, hope you guys save up and hope you get the Reaper skin of your favorite team. And I think we will see you guys next week with a lot to talk about because naturally this is going to be a very interesting tournament and we are going to see some upsets here and there. We are going to see some not so surprising dominant wins. So it's going to be super fun to talk about next week. So we will just see you on the other side and hope you have a great time viewing the tournament. Bye bye.